Out after just 10 months, David Moyes is sacked as Manchester United manager, another victim of the demand for quick success in a sport that has become a multi-billion-dollar industry. As the beautiful game turned ugly, this is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Mike Hanna. Manchester United used to be just a football club. Now it's also a global brand with American owners, run by a former investment banker, with offices in New York, Hong Kong and London. And when millions, even billions, is at stake, failure is not an option. So with last season's English champions struggling in the table, it was decided that the manager had to go. David Moyes lasted only 10 months at Manchester United, taking charge of 51 games. He's one of 10 managers who've been dismissed this season, including Paulo Di Canio, who lasted just 13 games at Sunderland. But that wasn't the shortest ever reign of a Premiership manager. That record goes to Peter Reid of Charlton Athletic, out after just 7 games in 41 days. But there's one man who bucks the trend. Arsene Wenger has been Arsenal's manager for more than 1,000 games across 17 years. And despite the high turnover of English managers, the Premier League does not have the worst record in Europe. Premier League managers tend to keep their jobs for around 2 years, which is also the same as managers in France's top league. German managers are normally in the top job for an average of 22 months. In Italy's Serie A, it's around 19 months, while in Spain, the average manager will be in the job for less than a year. Well, plenty to discuss with our guests, and let's bring them in. Here in our studio is Peter Reid, who's been a Premier League manager with Manchester City and Sunderland. He's also a former England international player. In Nairobi, we have James Wokabi, a sports writer and presenter for the African network Supersport. And in Plymouth in the UK is Simon Rines, a sports business analyst and consultant for a number of English League football clubs. Welcome to you all. Let's begin here in Doha with Peter Reid. We're looking at those statistics. Who on earth would want to be a manager?
Well, there'll be plenty who want the Manchester United job, that's for sure. But it's all down to results on a football pitch. But you, in your introduction, you just said what a big industry now. And Manchester United's a massive brand. So then football results, and it does seem harsh, you know, after following Sir Alex, the amount of time David's got. But I think if it had kept him in the top 4, means a Champions League place, the finances would have been okay, and I think that would have been all right with the owners. But once you come out of that top 4, and the way the results have gone, I think it was inevitable. As cruel as it may be, I think it was inevitable.
Well, James Wokabi, we heard the phrase there, a bit harsh. Do you think the decision to get rid of Moyes was harsh?
Well, I don't think it was harsh. I actually think United made a mistake at the very start when they were hiring him. I think they hired him a bit too quickly. They didn't take their time. I think everyone seems to have been caught out by Sir Alex Ferguson waking up and saying, I'm going, I'm gone. So they looked to him, but I don't think they actually looked at it and figured out exactly, would he fit in? Did he have the caliber to do it? And I think they've been found out in the last 10 months because he simply hasn't looked, hasn't spoken, hasn't carried himself like a Manchester United manager. And it doesn't help that it was under Sir Alex Ferguson. Did he have the caliber? Did he have the personality to take over from Sir Alex Ferguson? Probably not. But then they picked him, and now they've realized we are making a mistake. We are a big brand, so we've got to start correcting it and correct it now.
Well, Simon Rines, it's a very, very unforgiving business in the end, is it not?
Yeah, it's very unforgiving. I mean, sport is a very competitive industry anyway, irrespective of the huge amounts of money now involved. And if you don't succeed sportingly, there are a lot of owners who aren't happy, but now there's bankers who aren't happy as well, and financial directors. So there's no room for failure at the top.
Well, Peter Reid...
Can I interrupt? I think one of the reasons, I mean, as James just said there, David Moyes wasn't. I think one of David's mistakes was not getting in a transfer window, not getting stellar players in. Now, I know for a fact he tried to get Fabregas in, Bale in. Now, Manchester United, besides losing Sir Alex Ferguson, lost David Gill, the chief exec, who was very, very shrewd in the transfer market and in them dealings. I think a mistake in the summer, Manchester United, massive club, one of the best in the world, they should have been buying the likes of Fabregas, Bale, who were stellar players. That was a massive mistake. That was a massive mistake, and that is what has cost David. Don't forget, Manchester United won the title by 11 points last year, Premier League champions, and haven't improved. You've always got to keep improving in football.
Yes, that fall from grace was massive. I mean, James Wokabi, what we're hearing there is as Peter was mentioning, the former chief executive Peter Gill going as well, not David Gill, not just not just Alex Ferguson. It was almost as though what was still had the trappings of a family club changed with a takeover by outside interest. Do you think that was part of the problem, where the whole problem started?
Well, I think the problem, of course, started with the takeover by the Glazers, because when they took over, remember, they borrowed money against the club and put the club in huge debt. So whereas previously, Manchester United could compete and get the very best to Old Trafford, this time they couldn't, because they're struggling with debt. And then this coincides with the rise of your Chelseas, your Manchester Cities, your PSGs, your Monaco. So the market has become competitive. They're unable to compete. If you look back a couple of seasons ago, they had spent less money than Stoke City. Now, when Manchester United spends less money than Stoke City, then there is a problem, because the team is a global brand. And I think that's when things started going down. But then they had Ferguson, who has the personality, who has the experience. So he held things together. They kept on going. They were able to continue making up for the lack of resources, lack of the better players. Because look at it. Other than Robin Van Persie, who else have they had to sign? Chris Smalling, Phil Jones. These are probably not the kind of players that you think about when you go back to the days of Dwight York and the days of Ruud van Nistelrooy and the days of your Cristiano Ronaldos, and you get the feeling that since the Glazers took over, it's been a bit of a struggle for United to compete in the transfer market.
Well, Simon Rines, we're talking that the bottom line here is performance, but the bottom line is profit. And perhaps the final straw on this particular camel's back was not making the Champions League, clearly not going to be able to make the top four of the Premier League. Now that has immense financial implications, does it not?
Yeah, I mean, just from TV rights, getting into the Champions League guarantees you around $50 million a season. I think it's a bigger picture, though, because Manchester United sponsors, for example, they want the global exposure that the Champions League brings, and they have something like 30 sponsors around the world now, varying from small $2 million deals up to the $50 million deal that Chevrolet has recently signed or will come into operation soon. So it's not just about the Champions League TV money. It goes a lot further than that. There's merchandise, there's other commercial rights such as hospitality rights at those matches that they'll be missing, gate receipts from the Champions League. So a lot rides on getting into the top four.
Well, Peter Reid, I mean, you're very much a globe-trotter these days. Yes. It is a global business. We're not just talking Premier League here with UK supporters. It's global, isn't it?
No, I travel the world. I was manager of Thailand a couple of years back, and the interest in the Far East in the Premier League is absolutely massive. And just listening to, sorry, I forgot your name.
Simon Rines.
Simon, about the sponsors. It's a catch-22 situation for the Glazers, because they want the sponsors, they want the big money, but like James said, are they going to give? We know they give them 70 million for Mata and Fellaini. Now, one of the reasons I think David went, besides results, was them buys. Mata's only short, but Fellaini, I don't think, is a Manchester United player. So I think they've decided, if there is money out there to spend, they don't want David to spend it. But the Glazers have got to loosen the purse strings if they want to compete with the Barcelonas, the PSGs, and the Fair Play League's coming in. It is in now. So it's going to be a problem now, because Manchester United, even though they're champions, are falling behind, and there's no decent youth team players coming through. You know, where I think Januzaj is one who's different class, but he's the only one. So when Manchester United were built, Sir Alex's first success was built in that class of '92, if everyone remembers. You know, them young players coming through. Nowadays, they're not there. You have to go and spend the money now.
Yes, but once again, they're not there. I mean, James Wokabi, Peter mentioning that class of '92 and the build-up that one had in that generation of Manchester United players under Alex Ferguson, it appears that now there is not the time to do this, to develop that kind of organised unit, some of them coming up through your youth sections of the club. It is now instant gratification, is it not?
You simply do not have the time. You either have got to have the money, like your PSGs, like your Chelseas, or your Man Cities, or you've got to have a manager who's been there and who can be afforded the time. Now, Ferguson could do it with the likes of Raphael, he could do it with the likes of Nani, he could do it with the likes of Anderson, just keep at it. Arsene Wenger can do it, but those are probably the only two managers who can do it. For the rest of them, it's cutthroat. You want to be in the Champions League, you're working, you're giving it day in, day out, and there's no room. On the other hand, when you're trying to groom your players, Chelsea is buying them ready-made. Monaco is buying them ready-made. It's buy them for now. So that time when you could build 6 years before you get a trophy, 7 years before you get a trophy, 7 years before you get to Champions League, it's just not there because everyone wants to get in. Because the difference in Champions League and Europa alone is huge. It's immense. And all teams want to be the Champions League. All teams want to be where it is. The money is, where the prestige is, where that anthem is played. So you've got to push. So the days of waiting for the fabulous class of '92 from Manchester United, I don't see it happening.
Well, another legendary football manager, Bill Shankly, once said that at a football club, there's a holy trinity. The players, the managers, and the supporters. Directors don't come into it. They are only there to sign the checks. Well, Simon Rines, that is clearly a thing of the past.
Yeah, I mean, picking up on a couple of the points there, the role of the management in football, I mean, the commercial and the actual business management in football, I think is quite interesting in this respect, because I'm not sure that they're really that good at managing transition. If you look at any other industry where the sort of figurehead of a company goes, there's a properly managed transition to bringing in a new person, whereas in football, I mean, I'd be interested to hear what Peter's got to say about this, but in football, when a manager tends to leave, a new manager comes in and immediately replaces all of the backroom staff, and you know, the styles of play changes, everything just changes overnight, and I'm not sure that that's really the best way to run things going forward. I think one of the exceptions is Barcelona. I know they're having a slightly difficult season, but you see that their whole style of play, their youth system, the investment in youth and bringing those players through has been quite consistent over the past 10 years, and from that respect, I'd argue that they're managed a lot better.
Well, Peter Reid, that thing about transition.
I think that's a good point Simon's made, but even Barcelona, we've got a fantastic youth system. I've had to go out and get Neymar for millions and millions. Even they've got dragged into it now. And they are a great role model, I've got to say that. Bayern Munich had handled it well, haven't he? Hitfield went, Pep Guardiola's come in, and they won a treble last year, but he's kept it going. Now, one of the good models in England is Southampton in terms of the young players. You know, Shaw, over the years, they've got Shearer through, they've got Bale, they've got Shaw through, Lallana. They've done really well with young players. And somehow, big football clubs have got to marry the youth development and going out and doing it in a transfer market. And like here, Simon says, that transition from one manager going, there should be, as an industry, it should be a football club. Yes, it's still there, it's still got the principles, the values, but the next man in has got to come in and buy into that, because it saves an awful lot of money. People saying David Moyes was mistaken in getting rid of the likes of Mike Phelan, Mullenstein, you know, all the backroom staff, Eric Steele. Now, it's not for me to say whether he's right or wrong, but certainly, if it's not broke, why try to mend it?
Well, Simon Rines, I mean, that point that you make about transition is that football clubs aren't kind of structured for it. We're looking at big businesses, for example, do transition pretty efficiently. Well, they have to. But it seems that football clubs aren't quite that good at it, despite the fact that there's always transition, as we see from the statistics.
Yeah, I mean, I think football, despite all the money that's involved at the moment, still is still governed by a culture that's been around for 30 or 40 years. You know, there's a lot of egos at play. The management hasn't shown itself to be that effective in a lot of clubs in the past. I mean, you only have to look at the likes of Leeds and what happened there. You know, there's some very poor decision making that goes on in football. And one of the other things that I think we should possibly bear in mind is that, relatively speaking, football clubs are huge brands, but actually quite small companies. You know, I remember someone saying a few years back that the average football club in the Premiership is about the size of the average supermarket. Now, that's not the supermarket chain, that's the supermarket store in terms of turnover. And yet they're bringing in people on huge salaries on the management side, not just the player management side, but the commercial management side, who don't really appear to justify that level of pay. You know, they're not top people from industry coming in often. So, you know, there's a lot that could be improved in the management of football all the way through clubs, I feel.
Well, at that particular point, let's just take a look at the top end. Forbes magazine compiles a list of the most valuable football clubs in the world. In the top spot is Spanish club Real Madrid. It's worth an estimated $3.3 billion. Just behind them is Manchester United with a current value of around $3.2 billion. And the third most valuable club is Barcelona. It's worth $2.6 billion. Now, that's a long way away from little supermarkets.
Well, Real Madrid allegedly, I say allegedly, got bailed out by the Spanish government. Now, I'm not saying, so I think some of them examples may be a bit misleading. But to go back to something, I was at Leeds United as a manager when David O'Leary, Terry Venables, then myself, when it was meltdown. You know, after getting into the Premier League, the Champions League, getting to semi-final. But when they got out of that top four, when they stopped getting into the Champions League, meltdown. Financially, it was meltdown because they had financed and they'd done the budget to being in there. It's precarious business. Precarious, mind you, if banks can go under, big banks can go under all over the world. Why not football clubs?
Oh, fair point. But James Wokabi, the point is that we see that it appears is that the manager always takes the blame. The team does badly, or it doesn't make Champions League qualification, and it's the manager who gets it in the neck. Why is that?
Well, because he is the boss. He coaches the team, he puts the team out. It's his work, it's his job to make sure it happens, especially in England, where the manager also has a say on who to sign and who not to sign. Of course, in Spain, it's a bit different because the technical director and the president will decide who to get and who not to get. But if you're David Moyes, you've been given the team, you've been told there is the money spent, then people expect you to go out there and deliver because it's your job. And I think that is where David Moyes struggled, or that is where he failed, because the team didn't play the way United play. The players weren't happy with him. The fans weren't happy with him. He didn't have the results. He didn't have the transfer guys that he wanted to sign. So, in essence, there is not one place he could pick up and say, let's hold on to this, let's build on that. And hey, the buck stops with the manager. If he was flying, when we talk about when Jose Mourinho beats PSG, we all hail him because of that run he did to go and give the instructions. We talk about him. It's him we give the praise. So, the same way, if you're not performing, especially in England where you've got quite of a say on who you want to sign and why you want to sign him, then I guess you've got to take the flak.
I think that's a good point, but when David Gill went and Edward Wood would come in, Edward has got no experience on that transfer side of the football market. Now, I'm led to believe it was some of his fault that some of them players weren't signed for Manchester United in the summer. But, like you rightly said, it's the manager who carries the can. Now, certainly, when you're talking about these massive brands where it's such a huge amount of money, I think sometimes the football side, yeah, the manager doesn't get results. But on that financial side, Edward Woodward's got to look at himself. And I've got to say, I think the players have got to look at themselves. I mean, I know David's come in and followed Sir Alex in a hard job, but you're telling me, no one can tell me that a team that wins the championship by 11 points, virtually the same players, and obviously Man City and Chelsea have improved, don't get me wrong, but they should nowhere near be finishing 7th. So, manager responsibility, yeah, but some of them players who are highly paid individuals I've got to take responsibility as well, in my opinion.
Well, Simon Rines, your view on that, the accountability from the players as well as the manager. There's no players at this stage being dropped.
No, I mean, I can see what Peter's saying there. Clearly on the footballing side it hasn't worked. Now, I'm not an expert on the footballing side. I think, to be fair to David Moyes, one of the great assets Man United had with Alex Ferguson was that he could grind out results from relatively mediocre squads. You know, he had some great squads, but he had ups and downs. He also had long periods where there wasn't a very strong opposition, whereas this season suddenly I think the top four as they are now and Everton as well are suddenly seem to have really got their act together. So it's a lot stronger opposition that David Moyes has faced and possibly a weaker squad than he might have hoped to have had, and obviously what happened last summer in the transfer market contributed to that. But I think, you know, you've got to take your hat off to what Sir Alex Ferguson did all these years in grinding out those results, winning away at the likes of, you know, Norwich or whatever, that have proved a lot more difficult for David Moyes.
Well, James Wokabi, I mean, your view about that, to what extent others should be accepting responsibility, not just the manager?
Well, here's the thing. Yes, Ferguson got results. I agree with Simon. He got results with a relatively mediocre team. It wasn't the strongest of teams. A team that played Phil Jones in midfield, a team which had Fabio and Rafael, probably not the strongest of teams. But here's the thing. David Moyes comes in. He's told, go out there, sign the player that you want. How long does it take to sign Fellaini? A person who he had his contract, he knows exactly what's in the contract, what he needs to do to get him. He's unable to do that until the final day of the transfer deadline day. He wants to sign Leighton Baines. He knows exactly what are the conditions. He just seems to not quite get it. And I think from there onwards, everyone sort of lacked faith in him. People wanted him to stand up and be counted. He wasn't quite standing up, and I guess the players sort of started feeling what's going on here. So everyone sort of just let it go. So ultimately, I agree, yes, the Glazers should probably have given Ferguson more money way back then. He probably needs more support. It certainly was a mistake to have David Gill leave at the same time as Sir Alex Ferguson, because you're losing the two most important people in the squad, someone who negotiates and then someone who then coaches. But then even when all that is said and done, like Peter says, it's the same squad that won the league 11 points ahead last season. They have no business being 7th. In the current season and out of Europe, and possibly out of Europe completely for the first time in what? Yeah. Since 1990?
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. I mean, you know, we're not saying Manchester United should have won the Premier League, but he shouldn't be 7th. He shouldn't be 7th. And nowadays, managers identify players. They don't get involved in the financial side of buying a player. So I think, like we've mentioned before, David Gill, Sir Alex Ferguson, as a pair, very hard act to follow.
But is there sadness in all of this? Managers come, managers go, but is there a kind of slight sadness that the game has changed so much, Peter?
No, if you look back to Brian Clough, then many years ago, going to Leeds United, for one of the best managers, that didn't last long. Some managers haven't got a fit, and let's have it right. In industry, if figures, I mean, Tesco 4 years ago were massive. Now, the profits are falling. They changed the chief exec a couple of years. It happens in every industry. Football, because it's out there, the media, we're all talking about it, from Plymouth to Nairobi to Doha. It's that big now. It's like you said, worldwide brand, and it's highlighted that much. And people care. People care. There's Manchester United fans in Nairobi, Thailand, Indonesia. You know, every kick of the ball, they're hanging on. So that's why it's highlighted. That's why we're talking about it.
Well, James Wokabi, very, very quickly, your view on that. Is there a slight lingering sadness in this?
Well, not really, because it's a high-pressure job. There's all the adrenaline that comes with it. There's all the prestige that comes with it. So you've got to be able to handle the pressures that come with it. Like Peter says, people all over the world are interested. We had a guy in Uganda bet his own wife because of the Manchester versus Arsenal game. It's that important. It's that serious. So you really cannot afford to there's really no room for what you get and what you sign in for. You just have got to go there and deliver.
Well, at that particular point, my thanks to our guests, James Wokabi, Simon Rines, and Peter Reid. And thank you so much for watching the show. From me, Mike Hanna, and the team, goodbye for now.